Welcome back, everyone. Today, I'm going to be giving you guys my list of my personal top 20 albums of 2024. So these are the albums that thrilled and excited me the most, the ones that I was listening the most to in 2024. Overall, I listened to over 100 new albums that were released in the year of 2024. I'd say over half of them I enjoyed. It was a really, really good year for music. So there were so many albums that I had to leave off of my list today that it really upset me. I had to narrow it down to 20 so that I had some room to talk about each album. So if there are any albums today that I didn't mention that you guys really, really loved, don't forget to let me know down below in the comments. Give me a couple of reasons why you loved those albums. If you guys want to provide me with your top 5, top 10, top 15, or your top 20 albums of the year, definitely let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys, so don't forget to do that. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends. It helps boost this channel and the algorithm. And with that all out of the way, let's get into the list. Kicking us off at number 20, I have Magdalena Bay's Imaginal Disc. This was a surreal album to listen to. It is glorious, glamorous, all of those words. I'm going to run out of descriptive words today, so I apologize if I repeat any descriptors, but there's only so many words you can put out there when you're describing music. But this album was special. I was put onto Magdalena Bay about 4 years ago. I remember listening to their album Mercurial World, and it became one of my favorite albums of 2021. Absolutely beautiful. Some of my favorite tracks on there. And this one as well. I really, really liked this album. I didn't like it quite as much as Mercurial World. Like I said, some of my favorite songs of all time are on Mercurial World. But for this one, still a phenomenal output by them. Just a little bit less catchy. My favorite song off of this album is probably Image. I know that's a little bit boring. That was kind of the most popular song on the album, but it's a beautiful song. And I loved the production on this. Like I said, very, very glittery and just poppy and beautiful. And the lead voice on this album, I'm forgetting her name right now. I apologize for blanking on it, but her voice is angelic. I absolutely love listening to her. And I have Magdalena Bay, Imaginal Disc, at number 20. At number 19, I have Death's Dynamic Shroud. You like music? This was a fantastic album. Death Dynamic Shroud is another group that I was put onto, again, about 4 or 5 years ago, and I really, really enjoy their music. The production, again, is phenomenal. Very, very surreal. Again, kind of all over the place. This album is not as accessible as the one that I just mentioned in Magdalena Bay, but I think the production was very, very interesting on it, and that's the reason why I'm putting it above Magdalena Bay, because there was points on this album where I was like, what is happening? Like, whenever you have an album like that where you're like, what is going on with my ears right now? Like, what am I actually listening to? This is a lot of noise, but it's beautiful. It all connects and it makes sense. That's a beautiful feeling. And some of my favorite albums have been like that on a first listen. I don't really understand what's happening because there's so much sensory input all at once. It's like you kind of have to take a couple listens to understand like where everything's going on. I love Death's Dynamic Shroud. I think that they're one of the most interesting, I don't even know what you would call them, electronic music groups out there right now. So highly recommend checking them out. I have You Like Music at number 19. At number 18, I have Blue and Exile's Love Ominous World. This was a fantastic output by the classic duo of rapper and producer Blue and Exile. If you've never listened to their album Below the Heavens from 2007, I believe it is one of the greatest hip-hop albums of all time. It's an absolute classic. It's probably, I don't know, it depends on what you consider underground, but it's probably one of, if not the greatest underground hip-hop album ever produced. Exile's production always blows me away. And Blue, man, one of the most creative rappers of our generation. Like, his lyrical ability is unmatched. I mean, he's up there with Kendrick Lamar. He's up there with Lupe Fiasco. He's up there with the best writers in hip-hop, and this was another phenomenal output by him. His album a couple years ago, Miles, I actually have that one on vinyl because it was one of my favorite albums of all time. I might have even liked it more than Below the Heavens. And this output, Love Ominous World, not in my absolute top echelon of Blue and Exile albums, but it's up there. It's one of the better outputs that they've had, and I just think that it's a phenomenal underground rap album. And if you want some like easy, laid back kind of jazz rap, if you're more into like 90s hip hop, I think you'll really, really like this one. And I highly recommend checking out Blue and Exile if you're a hip hop fan and you haven't already. So I have Love Ominous World at number 18. Next up at number 17, I have Vince Staples, Dark Times. I really, really liked this output by Vince Staples. I thought it was one of his strongest albums in many, many years. I wasn't the biggest fan of the Park Ramona album, and I think this is his best album since maybe Summertime '06, or at least Big Fish Theory. I think this was a great output by him. His songwriting is back on point. He's got a message in this one. He's got something that he wants to say. And this was one of the more personal Vince Staples albums that he's put out. Vince Staples is one of those rappers that I kind of forget about sometimes because he's not in like my top 10, my top 20 favorite rappers. So sometimes I tend to forget about him and he falls out of the loop of my regular playlist. But every time I come back to him, I forget just how amazing of an artist he is and just how talented he is. He's truly one of the greatest rappers of our generation. And I think this is just another tremendous output by him. I can't even name you a favorite song off of this album because the album it flows so well from start to finish that I just put it on and let it play. So I really, really enjoyed Dark Times by Vince Staples, one of the funniest rappers out there, and on this album, one of the deepest as well. So shout out to Vince Staples. I have that at number 17. At number 16, I have another lyrical genius who I briefly mentioned before. I have Lupe Fiasco's Samurai. Lupe Fiasco is a tremendously underrated rapper. He was a little bit popular in the mid-2010s, and he had a couple popular songs come out, but for the most part, he's been kind of an underground rapper, and he's one of the greatest writers in hip-hop today. You take his lyrics, you pull them apart. I could do full song analysis videos on so many of his songs. I'm going to get back to doing that soon. I really enjoyed doing those song analysis videos about a year ago, so I'm going to get back to that soon. And Lupe Fiasco is a prime candidate, especially this album, Samurai. There's so many great tracks on this, and I really couldn't pick a favorite one. There's so many great tracks. The storytelling throughout this album, I mean, it's what you expect from Lupe Fiasco, just phenomenal storytelling, start to finish, and he's one of my favorite rappers of all time, again. So, of course, when he puts out an album, it's going to be on my list. And there's a lot of hip-hop albums on my list today, so that kind of shows you guys my lenience and taste. I tend to lean more towards hip-hop music as far as modern music goes. My most listened to genre is still probably classical, but as far as, bumping stuff and driving around in my car and working out and that kind of stuff, that kind of music, it's usually hip-hop. So there'll be a lot of hip-hop entries today, so I apologize, but I have Lupe Fiasco's Samurai at number 16. At number 15, I have Denzel Curry's King of the Mischievous South. I can never say that word, so I apologize. I tend to struggle with it. But Denzel Curry, again, with another phenomenal album. Is it as good as like Taboo, which I think is one of the greatest hip-hop albums of the 2010s? Probably not. I think that was a pretty special record. It was a very conceptual record when he put it out. This is still up there. It's in his probably top 3 or top 4 albums that he's ever put out, but Denzel Curry is an incredibly consistent artist. There's very, very few times where he puts out a song where I'm like, this is kind of whack. I don't really get this one. This one kind of sucks. Most of his work is pretty consistent, and he's a very hard-working artist in the hip-hop landscape. His lyricism, obviously, is genius. He's one of the best writers. I wouldn't quite put him on a Blue or a Lupe Fiasco level. He's not quite on that Kendrick level, but he's kind of on the rung just underneath. He can rap incredibly quickly, too. He has an ability to just flow that I find really admirable. There's quite a few songs from him that I try myself to rap because they're so enjoyable to rap them. He finds a flow, and it's fun to listen to him rap. And he's a funny guy, too. He's kind of got that Vince Staples character to him. He's a little bit mischievous, I guess. And I thought this was a terrific album by Denzel Curry, and I have it at number 15. At number 14, I have Tyler, the Creator's Chromacopia. This was a very interesting album. I loved the production on it. I find when Tyler, the Creator, gets creative with his production, gets creative with his vocals, he tends to make his best music. I personally think that Igor is his best album. I know some people may think that it's Flower Boy. It's probably between one of those two. Those are the two that I have on vinyl as well. I don't have Call Me If You Get Lost, and I haven't picked up Chromacopia yet, but I probably will eventually. I did like this one a bit more than Call Me If You Get Lost. Call Me If You Get Lost felt a little bit more back to his old roots, a little bit more of that rapping Tyler, whereas Chromacopia feels like a continuation from Igor, where Igor, he was kind of getting into his more conceptual and artistic, and he was starting to be more of an artist rather than just a rapper, you know? So I really, really liked this output from Tyler. I don't really have a favorite song off of the album. I mean, I like Sticky, but everybody likes Sticky. I mean, there's so many great songs on this album. The whole album's really a fantastic listen. And like I said, I really like Tyler when he's in this creative zone where he's trying new things, where he's being experimental with the production, and he's, you know, changing his voice to sound different ways, and he's not being, you know, that one-dimensional rapper that we remember from the earlier kind of Odd Future days. But not to crap on the Odd Future days. I love that Odd Future music too, but this new Tyler that's kind of emerged in the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years has been really interesting to me. He's one of the more interesting figures in music today, one of the more creative artists, and I absolutely love this album. It's not higher on my list just because it's not my favorite Tyler, the Creator album, and there were some albums that I just listened to a little bit more throughout this year, but I understand if this is some people's like favorite album of the year. It was a really, really fun listen. So I have Chromacopia at number 14. At number 13, I have Freddie Gibbs's You Only Die Twice. Freddie Gibbs has, over the last, 5-7 years, somewhere in that time frame, whenever Pinata came out. So, wow, that was 10 years ago. Wow, I've been listening to Freddie for 10 years. Holy, time flies. Over the last 10 years, Freddie Gibbs has become one of my favorite hip-hop artists of all time. Pinata was the first album that I listened to by him. I eventually went back and re-listened to his old work, found it to be amazing. I really, really like his older stuff. It tends to get slept on, but Pinata, when that first came out, man, that was a life-changing album. Madlib, probably my favorite producer of all time when it comes to hip-hop. You put him with anybody and it's going to be a good album, but Freddie Gibbs impressed me so much with Pinata and his rapping ability that he quickly rose to become one of my favorite hip-hop artists. And then you had 2019's Bandana, and that was one of, if not the greatest album of the year. I absolutely loved that one. I have both of those records on vinyl. Madlib is just, I could talk about him all day. All day long I could talk about Madlib. To me, he's the greatest hip-hop producer of all time. But this album is not produced by Madlib, which puts it a little bit lower on my list of Freddie Gibbs albums, but I still really, really liked it. I thought it was fantastic. It's probably not in my top 3, but it's just outside of my top 3 Freddie Gibbs albums. And Freddie Gibbs, every time he hops on the mic, he's interesting. He has great storytelling ability. Lyrically, like, he's up there with the best. Again, I don't put him on like that Lupe, Kendrick Lamar level. Those guys tend to use poetry in a different way. It puts them a little bit higher for me. But Freddie Gibbs is like right up there with his talent and ability. He flows in a way that's just, oh my! He has a freestyle on YouTube. Go search this up after you're done this video, because this video is way better than mine. He has a freestyle video where he's freestyling with his son on his lap. And it's one of the greatest hip-hop songs you've ever heard in your life. The flow is insane. You can't even believe it's a freestyle. And I think it's on Hot 107 or some radio show he did it on. One of the greatest, if not the greatest freestyles I've ever heard in my life. Like, it's up there with the Black Thought one. Phenomenal. He's got such an ability to rap and to flow and just to make things sound effortless. His breath control is amazing. And Freddie Gibbs is one of those guys who I look up to. He's not that I'm a rapper, but I look up to him just for his ability and his talent. He's also really funny too. I love listening to him on podcasts. There's a clip where he's on Joe Rogan. He's talking about shooting a crackhead 9 times with a Mac-10, and Joe Rogan's like taken back by it. It's a really funny moment, but every time I hear him talk, he's a funny guy and a chill dude. So I love Freddie Gibbs. It's just not my favorite album by him, so I have it a little bit lower on my list as well. I have that at number 13. At number 12, I have Yeat. 2093. Yeat is a guilty pleasure of mine. Kind of like Playboi Carti, I cannot tell you that he's a lyrical genius. He's nowhere close to the previous rappers that I've mentioned in terms of lyrical ability. His song lyrics don't mean much. In fact, I don't even know if they have a meaning at all. And I just love Yeat. He's just fun, man. He's just a fun kid. He's about my age, and he's just making music for fun. Over the past few years, I kind of got onto him. I started seeing some positive reviews for his music, and I was really skeptical because I always kind of thought of him as almost like a Gunna or a Lil Baby type, like somebody who's not really the most talented, and I don't even really want to pay attention to their music for that reason. But I started listening to Yeat's music, and the production, The production's what hooks you. The production is definitely what hooks you. The production, especially on this album, was outstanding. Like, it just gets you going. It's the perfect workout music. It pumps you up. It gets the blood flowing in your veins. It's amazing. I don't even know how to classify the production because it's sort of trap, but it's like futuristic trap music. I'm not too sure. And then Yeat, he's just a fun guy. He's just having fun. The lyrics don't mean much. The way he says things is just funny. There's a humor to how he delivers his lines, and it's just enjoyable music. I don't know what it is about it. I find it to be very entertaining, and it gets me pumped up, and I like listening to it when I'm working out. But I cannot sit here and tell you that Yeat is like a genius artist who writes the most meaningful lyrics or anything like that. But it's fun music, and I thought that this 2093 album in particular from Yeat had some of the most amazing production I've ever heard from him. I think he does some of his own production, but not all of it. Somebody can correct me if they're bigger Yeat fans out there than me, but this is a little bit of a guilty pleasure. Him and Playboi Carti, I don't I don't hold in like the highest respect when it comes to musical artistry, but they are incredibly entertaining and they're fun and they just make things loose and fun, I guess. I don't know. I just really like this album. So I have that at number 12. At number 11, I have Boldy James, Across the Tracks. Now, this is a more traditional hip-hop artist, a little bit more grime in there, a little bit less of that whatever the qualities Yeat has. It's less of that. Boldy James is somebody who, if you're more into like 90s hip hop, that's kind of like the grimy, more Wu-Tang, Nas kind of stuff. I think you'll really like Boldy James. He has this newer style of production that's kind of linked to Griselda. A lot of their producers overlap. And Boldy James appears a lot on the Griselda music and vice versa. But it's this kind of like grimy, picked apart 90s type beats that are really, grimy is really the best way to put it. That's kind of the best descriptor. But this new era, I'd say Freddie Gibbs fits in there to a degree as well. Some of the other artists that I'll talk about today kind of fit in that genre as well. And I really, really like this genre of hip hop music. It seems to be the way hip hop should and is going. Now, there is kind of a diversion in hip-hop of the trap music, and that seems to be evolving into the type of music that Yeat is making. But I personally more so prefer this kind of grimy layered production, sample-heavy, and just lyricism that is a little bit more serious than the Yeat stuff. So Boldy James on this record, Across the Tracks, is kind of at his deepest. I don't think it's his best album of all time, but he's also put out like 20 plus albums. He put out like 4 this year or something like that. He has a crazy output, but it's one of his more personal albums, and I found the production on it to be very clean and beautiful, and I just really liked this output from Boldy. He's one of my favorite rappers, largely because of his output, and we'll talk about a couple other rappers in a second here who have insane outputs as well, but Boldy James's output and his workflow is incredible, and then also, like I said, his lyricism is top-notch. I love the way his voice sounds. It's, again, not to reuse words too much, but it's very grimy. It's got that coarseness, almost like he's been smoking cigarettes for 50 years. It's got age to it, and for that sake, it's got a little bit of wisdom there, when he's rapping about stuff. I'll talk about another artist in a couple seconds here who does this to an even greater degree, but you almost feel like there's a wealth of stories there, and that comes through in his music. Each album has a new story somewhere in the track listing that's just captivating. And yeah, I really like Boldy James. I highly recommend you checking him out. He's kind of an overlooked rapper, and he's very underrated. So I really liked this Across the Tracks album. I have it at number 11. Getting into the top 10, kicking us off at number 10, I have a bit of a switch up here. We got a curveball. Some people might not be expecting this one with how the last couple entries have been going, but I don't just listen to hip-hop music. I listen to every genre of music, and being from Edmonton, Canada, I do listen to some country music from time to time, and I do like Zach Bryan, okay? I'm not going to comment on the guy as a person today because, there's been some stuff over the last year, especially getting mad at fans at concerts for throwing things on stage. He's handled that a little bit poorly, and some of his... I don't want to get into his personal life matters today. That's not what today's video is about, but personal life aside, Zach Bryan as an artist is quite amazing, and he's shown us that over the last couple years. And this album of 2024, The Great American Bar Scene, I believe is his greatest album he's ever put out. Now, I hope he tops it. Obviously, I want artists to keep getting better and better every year in every output, but this was just a phenomenal album. I thought, again, the production, like, you have the classic country vibe there, but he's also bringing in elements of folk. You hear all these different instruments on the album and these progressions that just, it makes the album so beautiful and so lively and so full. Like, it feels like a full experience. I listened to this album front to back when I first listened to it, and it was a great experience. I really, really liked it. Some of my favorite songs were Northern Thunder, 28, a lot of people like that one, and my favorite song on the album, just for the storytelling alone, is Oak Island. But there were so many great tracks on this album. I really, really like his music. I feel like he's a phenomenal artist. His songwriting ability is top-notch, especially when it comes to country music. There's a lot of modern country artists, especially in the last 10, 15, 20 years, who have really... my sister and my mom listened to a lot of country music, and growing up with them, it was just kind of the daily soundtrack, and I would have to put on my headphones to listen to my own music. And a lot of modern country music has very flat and just underwhelming lyricism, and it's just very generic, whereas Zach Bryan brings something, true to himself and new, and the way he writes songs is unique, and I really, really appreciate that, especially for country music. And same with the instrumentation too. Like, he's not cranking out the same generic country beats that we hear on every single Zach or Luke Bryan and Morgan Wallen song. They just all sound the same. Whereas Zach Bryan is just, every song has a new instrument or a different change up. There's just something unique about every single song on this album. So I really, really liked this album. I wish I could have put it higher, but I have to be truthful to what I honestly liked. And I liked this around number 10. So moving on to number 9. At number 9, we have King Sosa, Chief Keef, coming out with Almighty So 2. This album, man. Some people might be laughing right now. I don't know. But Chief Keef is one of those guys that I've admired. I've had a lot of respect for him early on. I mean, he put out that Love Sosa song when he was like 16. I think I was around the same age as him when that song came out, and that was huge. When that came out in school, that was the only song people would play. And to watch his career develop, man, it's been awesome. I think he's 29 years old now, so he's about 5 years older than me. But he put out an album with this one, Almighty So 2, that just, it blew me away. I was not expecting this from Chief Keef. As when I was younger, I looked at him as, somebody who made something amazing when he was really, really young and found a sound that was new and that influenced a lot of modern drill music, especially in the UK. But as he's developed over the years, I've watched this progression and watched him grow as an artist, and he's always exceeded my expectations. And this album is a perfect example of that. My expectations for it was pretty average. I'm like, this will be like a 7 out of 10 album. Like, I'll probably like it because I like Chief Keef, but he produced every single song on this album. Every single song is amazing when it comes to production. There's so many cool samples that are trickled in, and I mean, he's got a unique vibe to his production as well. And everything was clean and just beautiful. It was a beautiful album, really, from start to finish. The song Jesus, like the Jesus skit, that was beautiful. And the lyricism throughout the album, too. A lot of great storytelling, a lot of funny one-liners. That's kind of what we know Chief Keef for. But I feel like he stepped up his lyrical game as well. And he gave us an album that was just so well put together on every front. And I really think this is like almost a masterpiece of a rap album. Like, I was blown away. Really blown away from this album. I can't give you a favorite track. I really like Treat Myself. I like Too Trim, Band It Up, 1, 2, 3, Drifting Away. I like Prince Charming. I like every song on this album. Like, they all go hard. They're all great to listen to when you're in the car or when you're working out. They get you super hyped up. I love Chief Keef, man. And I thought, man, he blew me away with this album. Like, far exceeded my expectations. So shout out to King Sosa, Chief Keef. Yeah, I have him at number 9 this year, which I did not think I would be having Chief Keef this high on my list. But moving on to number 8. At number 8, speaking of rappers who produce their own albums, one of the greatest at that is, of course, JPEG Mafia, and As I Lay Down My Life for You is making its way at number 8 this year. Last year, my number 1 album of the year, I believe, was JPEG Mafia's Scaring the Hose. Phenomenal album. Just having Danny Brown on that made it so full and so fun and funny, and there's so many great moments on that album, and the production was just wild and absolutely insane and out there. Unfortunately, I can't put JPEG Mafia number 1 2 years in a row. Not that I wouldn't if this album wasn't as great as Scaring the Hose, but I don't think it quite lives up to that standard. I think it's probably his 4th, maybe 3rd best album. There's still a couple other JPEG Mafia albums that I like better than this one, but I thought the production on this one specifically was, again, phenomenal. I know I'm repeating myself a lot today, but the production specifically on this album just blew me away. He just keeps getting better and better every time he makes an album. A lot of creative choices on this one, and I can't even describe them to you. You have to listen to this album from start to finish. There are so many creative choices production-wise on this album that it stuck with me. I kept re-listening to it and trying to figure out, like, how does this man assemble a song? Because he just goes all out. Like, whatever he wants to put in there, he makes it work. And JPEG Mafia, I mean, his rapping ability is great. I mean, he's in prime form on this album. It's not anything that blows me away, but he's never really been a rapper that, like, blows me away with his rapping particularly, but he's great on this album. He's obviously one of the greatest rappers alive today. He's just not quite at the level of some of the other rappers that I have a little bit higher on this list, which I think will surprise some people. Obviously, we have to talk about the most popular rapper, well, maybe second. He's in the top 2 rappers alive today later on this list, but there's a couple more rappers that we'll talk about in a couple picks here that are pretty overlooked. They're pretty underground, but they really blow me away. So let's move on to the next pick. I have JPEG Mafia, As I Lay Down My Life for You at number 8. At number 7, well, for the next 3 picks, I have, before we get into those hip-hop artists that I just kind of teased you guys with, before we get into those, the next 3 picks are all albums that I thought had the most insane, intense, beautiful, magnificent production that I've heard all year. So these next 3 albums blew me away, specifically with their production. So the first one that I'm going to talk about here at number 7 is Clarence Clarity's Vanishing Act 2. I've been waiting a long time for a new Clarence Clarity album. I think the last one was in 2018. His 2 albums, I think he just has the other 2 albums. There might be 3, but the 2018 album and the 2015 album by Clarence Clarity are some of my favorite albums ever. I was trying to show this album, this new one, Vanishing Act 2, to my sister recently, and I was trying to explain it to her why I think it's so brilliant. It's hard to discuss. It's a lot happening all at once. It's a lot of sensory input. I feel like if you looked at a Clarence Clarity track, like on GarageBand or whatever people make music on, I'm obviously not a musician, but if you looked at a track, you would see like so many inputs on the track. There's so many different sounds happening all at once. It's a little bit of a sensory overload. I was trying to show it to my sister, and she's like, this is a lot happening. And I'm like, just wait until the chorus comes and how beautifully that sweeps in. And I think she liked the music, but it is a lot. It's not for everybody. It can be intense at times. My favorite tracks on the album were The Greatest Living Musician Found Dead. I really like that title for that track. And Old King, The World Moved On. Those 2 tracks in particular really impressed me, but the whole album is just a production masterpiece. And of course, it's Clarence Clarity. His voice is also on the album. He's also the singer, but he adjusts it and auto-tunes it and shifts it in ways that are so creative and really make for these, I don't know how to describe them. They're like pop moments. Like, when you listen to a pop song, like a Britney Spears song or something, there's sometimes moments in the song where just everything clicks and it feels good. Like something about it just feels good, and it tends to happen mostly in pop music. And Clarence Clarity is almost like a hunter for those moments. He almost tries to like pack too many into one song. And it becomes a masterpiece, in my opinion. Some people think it's too much, but he's like trying to create these perfect pop moments multiple times throughout one song, and it cascades together in this just beautiful symphony of of sound. And I don't know how else to describe his music. It's very difficult. You have to just go listen to it, really. But it's some of the most beautiful and interesting music that I've ever heard in my life. And he's one of my favorite artists for that reason. So I'm really happy to have a new album from him. It's not as great as the previous two in my personal opinion, but it's right up there. Like it's not like a step down or anything. It's right there. It's just the one from 2015, like that album, I think it's No Now. That album is so ahead of its time. Like so ahead of its time. I highly recommend, No Now. Please go check that one out. And then Think Peace is the 2018 album that I also really like. But yeah, those albums are phenomenal. Moving on. At number 6, I have Charli XCX's Brat. And I really, really wanted to put this one number 1 on my list, but it wasn't quite my most listened to album, and it wasn't the one that I've enjoyed the most. Like I don't know if I'm going to come back to this one more than the albums that are a little bit further ahead on my list, but I loved this one. This one easily could have been number 1. I am a huge Charli XCX fan. I got this on vinyl immediately. And I also have her How I'm Feeling Now and Charli. Yeah, the Charli album from 2019. I have those 3 albums on vinyl. I also think I have Crash too. So I think I have 4 albums of hers on vinyl. So I'm obviously a big fan of hers. I really, really like her music. I think when it comes to pop music, nobody really does it better. The production, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but it's amazing. It's so full and dynamic, and it's so punchy. Like if there's one descriptor that I could give to Charli XCX's production, it's punchy. It's very, very punchy, and it gets me going. Like when I work out, I'll have Chief Keef playing, I'll have Yeet playing, but then I'll also switch to a Charli XCX song because they really get you going. And then on this album, I mean, her singing is angelic. She's one of the greatest female vocalists today, I think. And the lyrics, again, phenomenal. The one song that really made me think that this is her best album that she's ever made was I Think About It All the Time. And it was a song kind of about her anxieties of having a child, and the fact that she's like vocalizing that she wants to have a child. She doesn't want to wait too long. She's really excited about it, but then she's also scared about it. And she was just so vulnerable on that track, and the lyricism just hit home. Not that I'm a woman, but it just cut deep, and I just thought it's just such a beautiful song. And there's so many songs on this album that really, really I thought were just gorgeous. B2B was probably another one of my favorites. That one gets me really pumped up. If I'm about to work out, I'll throw on B2B back to back, and that one gets me going right away. But the whole song is amazing, or the whole album is amazing. And then, of course, there's the deluxe version, Brat, and it's completely different, but also still Brat. I love that. I love that she changed all of her albums on Spotify to the covers that kind of match the theme. There's just a lot of creativity from the Charli camp in general, and I think she just keeps evolving every time she puts out an album, and she's one of my favorite artists of the last 10, 15 years. So yeah, I really, really liked this Charli album. I wish I could have put it higher on my list, but there was a couple albums that I liked a little bit more. So let's move on to that top 5. At number 5, I have Igloo Ghost's Title Memory XO. And this is probably the least accessible album that I'll talk about today. Maybe not. Maybe there's a couple hip-hop albums that I'm about to talk about that are pretty inaccessible. By inaccessible, I mean that they're just they're like very underground, so they're a little bit difficult to listen to, especially for somebody who's a little bit more of a casual enjoyer of music. If you listen to a lot of popular music, you might find it difficult to work your way through something like Title Memory XO, but there is no album that I heard in 2024 that impressed me more from a production end than this album. It was magnificent to listen through for the first time, and I still go back to it constantly. It came out earlier in the year, and constantly throughout the year I kept coming back to it because it's such an interesting album. You have to go listen to this album to understand what I mean, but the production is just so chaotic and some of the most creative production I've ever heard. There's not much as far as like vocals on this album. There's some samples that are twisted and distorted into sounding like choruses, but for the most part, this is just an absolute masterclass in production and a creative production. So many interesting sounds on this one. Again, I can't even describe it. I can't put it into words. You have to go and you have to feel the music. Some of my favorite tracks, if you want some to pick out, are Blue Hum, New Species, and Pulse Angel. Spawn '01 is also a pretty good one too. Choral Mimic is also good. They're honestly all good songs. The whole album's amazing. There's 13 tracks on the album, but even just looking at the cover art, what an interesting piece of art for the cover. Like, you're in the middle of a tidal wave or in the middle of the ocean, and you're playing with a record set, but then the records look like saws. It's such an interesting cover, and then the music is even more interesting than that. Igloo Ghost is a damn creative kid, man. He's a damn creative kid, and this album was special to me because it's not so much like I found it and nobody else listened to it, but nobody else that I knew in my circle was listening to it, and it felt like a piece of music that only I was enjoying. I know that's not true. I know other people watching this video have probably loved this album as well, but I had just a connection with it. I would keep coming back to it, and it was so damn interesting. And again, there's probably something to the fact that there was not really any vocals on it, that I could just kind of put it on in the background and just really listen to what was happening in the music. It's a terrific, terrific album, and I can't wait to see what this kid does next. Like, wow, what an album. Production-wise, like I said, the most impressive thing that I've heard this year by far. So let's move on to number 4. At number 4, I actually have a little bit of a cheat pick. So I'm putting 2 albums here because this artist put out 4 albums this year, 2 of which were kind of compilation albums of music that he previously made. For the most part, I think it's sometimes hard to track when songs were made with this artist, but it's the God Fahim, the Dump God, the Dump Legend, the 100 Tape Goat, as I like to call him, the one-man Wu-Tang Clan. The God Fahim, man, is probably the most underrated artist that I'll talk about today. He is the hardest working man in hip-hop today. They call him the 100 Tape Goat for a reason. He's made over 100 albums at this point, and he just keeps cranking them out. And you might think, like, somebody who cranks out that many albums, like, the quality is going to dip. It does not. The quality keeps getting better. Every single year this kid makes music, the music gets better and better and better. And I was put onto the God Fahim from another artist that I'll talk about in a couple picks here, but the God Fahim, he works very closely with, I'll just mention him now, Mach-Hommy. I will be talking about his album in a second here, but the God Fahim, I'm putting Machine Gun Vocabulary and Snakes at number 4 because both albums blew me away. The production, again, phenomenal, grimy, like very gritty production, bare bones, but such interesting samples and bits of music that just tingle your ears, like they shock you. This album was so beautiful. Both of them, Machine Gun Vocabulary and Snakes. Like, you don't expect production this gorgeous out of a rap album. I'll give you guys an example. One of the tracks off of Machine Gun Vocabulary really got to me for the production, and it was Detonate. Yeah, that one was definitely go check that one out. The production on that is crazy. There shouldn't be that level of production on an album that was this little listened to. Like, the God Fahim still, I believe, has less than 74,000 monthly listeners. That doesn't make any sense to me. This is one of the most talented rappers in hip hop right now, and he does not get the respect he deserves. At the same time, like, it's kind of nice to have an artist like that that's so underground and only you know about him. You know, a lot of pretentious music fans like that. They like having that artist that only they know about, but I want this guy to blow up because he deserves all the fame, all the accolades. He deserves the numbers for the output that he puts out. And, you know, there's so many songs off of Snakes and Machine Gun Vocabulary that I can't even name you guys my favorite tracks. This is also an artist, though, that I have to admit, not very accessible. It takes a while to get used to the God Fahim. He has a very dry delivery, and sometimes it can be a little bit monotone. But once you get used to it, once you get a little bit used to his delivery and you really start listening to the lyrics, you'll find that he is a one-man Wu-Tang Clan. He's a lyrical genius. He's put out, You know the type of music that Wu-Tang Clan makes, that kind of like aggressive, like very descriptive and violent type of lyricism? God Fahim is like a master at that. He's like better than the entire Wu-Tang Clan at that. And I'm somebody who champions the Wu-Tang Clan. They're like my favorite hip hop group of all time. But the God Fahim has perfected that. He's found such interesting ways to paint violent pictures within the hip hop art form. It blows me away. I could go on all day about the God Fahim and how goddamn underrated he is. It really irks me because I feel like more people should be listening to this guy's music. But I highly recommend checking out both of these albums. I have the God Fahim, the Dump God, at number 4. At number 3, I have Ka, The Thief Next to Jesus. Now, this album, I know I said this before, but this album for sure is probably the least accessible album. Even if you're like deep into hip hop and you love underground hip hop, this album still might be difficult for you to listen to. If you want to get into Ka, I would probably check out some of his earlier albums first. Descendants of Cain is a little bit easier to listen to than this one. It's just because the production is very, very bare bones and there's a lot of space in the music, and Ka is extremely monotone. Like he has no vocal range really at all. He's not going to switch up flows. He's not going to rap fast for you. He's very, very monotone and very straightforward. So with all that being said, you might be saying, well, why is this album so high on your list then? Honestly, purely for the poetry. I think Ka is perhaps one of, if not the greatest poet in modern hip hop today. And he's so overlooked because of the style of his music. It's, again, very bare bones, very cut and dry. There's a lot of space within the instrumentals, and within that space, he also creates more space with how he raps. He raps slow and monotone. So it's very poetic, and there's a lot of space there, but he commands that space with his lyrics. His lyrics are so interesting. Like, you have to listen to this guy, even if you don't like the music. Like, just search up the lyrics and read them. Or you guys can watch my song analysis videos. I've already done a complete song analysis series on his entire album, The Descendants of Cain. I've went through each and every song and spent half an hour breaking down the lyrics for each song. There's so much depth to his lyricism that he's become one of my favorite artists, let alone hip hop or rappers of all time. Like, he's up there with like the Beethovens and the Bachs for me. His poetry is so damn moving. Please go check this guy out. Like, please, if there's one artist today that if there's like 7 artists on this list today that you don't know about, and there's one that you should look at, I think it's Ka, because of his poetry. Again, I'm going to just keep going in circles here because it's really the thing that sticks out to me. There's one line, not from this album, from a previous album, that always sticks with me. It's the illest psalms written with killer palms. And I think that is like, that's just a brilliant bar, and you'll find that every like 15 of those in every single Ka song. Just a brilliant bar that you could just write out and put on a wall. The illest psalms, like P psalms, written with killer palms. Like, you have two P words there that sound like S. Psalms and palms. It's just brilliant. Like, I could go on all day analyzing his lyrics. I've already done that. I've already made several videos analyzing his lyrics and just how brilliant his poetry is. But I'm sorry for rambling and going in circles here, but Ka, to me, is one of the greatest hip-hop artists alive today. And like I said, maybe don't start with this album if you've never listened to him before. Go check out his previous work, but I have The Thief Next to Jesus at number 3 on my list. And at number 2, I have, honestly, 1 and 2 could be tied. Honestly, I love both of these albums equally. I couldn't really put one over the other. The reason why I put number 1 at number 1 is just because it's more popular and it's a little bit cleaner. It's a little bit more re-listenable. But for me, 1 and 2 are kind of tied. So at number 2, I have Mach Hommy's Rich Ass Haitian. Mach Hommy, if any of you guys know, is my personal favorite hip hop artist of all time. He's at least in the top 3. It's hard to pick one guy, but for me, it's MF Doom, Mach-Hommy, and Kendrick Lamar. Those 3 guys I put above everybody else when it comes to hip hop. And as far as, artists in general, music artists in general, or even just artists in general, they're like in the upper echelon for me. They're artists that have changed my life. They're the ones that I connect to the most. And I've listened to this album multiple times throughout this year. Unfortunately, I can't get it on vinyl. I can't get any of Mach-Hommy's albums on vinyl because they're all either sold out or they're like upwards to like $3,000. He prices his vinyls at ridiculous prices. He'll price a lot of them at like $333.33 or $777.77. And I like it. I like the marketing strategy to keep everything like super exclusive and low key and under wraps. But at the same time, I would love to own his music. It sucks because a lot of his music and a lot of his best music isn't anywhere to be found on the internet. It's scrubbed from Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. If you're lucky, maybe you can find it on Internet Archive. But his best albums of all time, especially The GAT, which the GAT, that album to me is one of, if not the best hip hop albums of all time. Like, it's in the top 3, top 5 for me. I put it up there with To Pimp a Butterfly, Mad Villainy. Like, it's right up there with the best hip hop albums ever. And you can't find it anywhere. Luckily, I have an MP3 download of it. But for the most part, his best music is scrubbed from the internet. On top of that, he hides his face, so you never see his face. There are some photos. I wouldn't spoil it for yourself. It's dumb that there are photos of his face on the internet, but every single photo you find, for the most part of him, he has a bandana on. He always hides his face, kind of like MF Doom with the mask. I like that. Billy Woods is another artist that does that. It's cool to kind of like keep that mystique and that underground persona. I like that. And then he also scrubs the internet of every single lyric on all of his songs. And it doesn't help that he raps in Creole. Some of the French I can understand, but the pure Creole is like foreign to me. I don't speak Haitian, but yeah, he raps in other languages and he distorts his voice heavily. And the distortion I love is actually a big part of why I love Mach-Hommy's music. It almost sounds like he's rapping through an old Xbox microphone, but it sounds cool. It's got this like grimy effect to it. And I like it. I personally like it. Some other people I've tried to show his music to, they're like, why is his voice all muddled? And I'm like, well, that's kind of like the point. But anyways, Mach-Hommy. I've said it before and I'll say it a million times. He's one of my favorite artists of all time for a lot of the reasons I just mentioned, the exclusivity of it, but his production as well. He does a lot of his own production. On this one, I think he did about half of it. I'm not 100% certain, but he's just so talented, man. He can rap in other languages. He can sing to a degree. Some people might argue if it's actual singing, but he does have a nice voice and he can sing certain parts of the song in a nice way. And as far as lyrical rappers go, I put him right up there with Kendrick Lamar, Lupe Fiasco, MF Doom, the greatest rappers of all time. He has a way of rhyming that's very unique. He can rhyme words that you don't think rhyme together, which is another unique ability. You know, Eminem can do that. Kendrick Lamar can do that. The best rappers ever. MF Doom can do that, can rhyme words that shouldn't be able to rhyme. So he has that ability. His poetry, again, is almost on the level of Ka. Like, it's that good. I can almost put him on that level. It's like Ka, Kendrick, Mach-Hommy, they have poetry in their lyricism. It's not just brilliant lyrics. It's not just funny metaphors and double entendres. It's like pure poetry. And Mach-Hommy has that to him as well. This album's not my favorite from Mach-Hommy. In fact, it's not really even in the top 5, but it's number 2 on my list. In fact, it's tied for number 1 because I love Mach-Hommy that much, and I think he's just that great of an artist. He's that consistent. My favorite song on this one is Pardon, but I also like the Sur le Pont d'Avignon. I used to sing that song as a kid because I grew up in a French school. So a lot of the French references I actually get, and that song, you know, it puts in this little lullaby song from, I think it's like from the 14 or 1500s. That song goes back quite a ways in France, but yeah, Mach-Hommy, man, he's one of my favorite artists of all time. So really, there's only one other artist that could kind of share the spot with him, and I've mentioned him before, and it's almost obvious what my number one pick is now. It's, of course, Kendrick Lamar's GNX. I love Kendrick Lamar. I got put onto him when I was very young. Definitely too young to be listening to him, but I was listening to Eminem at like 5 or 6 years old, so it doesn't really matter. But I got put onto Kendrick Lamar when I was about 11 years old. That Section 80 album was the first album that I heard from him, and then the first release that I was like excited for was the Good Kid, Mad City album, and that album changed my life. It's my most listened to hip hop album, probably by far. It's like that and Mad Villainy are like up and away from everything else. I've listened to Good Kid, Mad City like thousands of times front to back, and it's the storytelling on it, phenomenal. I can't wait to do song analysis videos of like Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst, and Poetic Justice, and so many great songs on that album. I literally think every single song on Good Kid, Mad City is a masterpiece, and I also think the same for To Pimp a Butterfly. So for me, those two albums are his best by far. His third best album is kind of up for grabs. I mean, it's between Damn, it's between GNX, and it's between Mr. Morale. I can't really pick a favorite. I'll go between the three. Like if I'm feeling a little bit gloomier, I want some like storytelling Kendrick Lamar, I might put on Mr. Morale. Or if I'm like trying to get hyped up, I might listen to Damn. Or if I'm like trying to drive around and cruise in my car and look cool, I might play GNX. So they're kind of all tied for me. They're kind of all second to those top two. But those 5 albums, and I guess you could throw in Section 82 in there. Those 6 albums from Kendrick Lamar are just brilliant pieces of art. They're some of my favorite pieces of art I've ever engaged with, like movie, book, album, all of that put together. They're some of my favorite pieces of art I've ever engaged with. I have, I think, 3 or 4 of his albums on vinyl. I'll get GNX when it eventually comes out on vinyl. Luckily, I can collect Kendrick Lamar's vinyl records. I can't do the same with Mach-Hommy, like I said before. It's unfortunate. Maybe one day I'll be able to afford a Mach-Hommy vinyl, but yeah. GNX, what are my favorite songs on it? It's hard to say. I mean, Luther's great. We all love Luther. I mean, SZA is just, she's got such an angelic voice. It's not even fair. It's not even fair, the voice that she was granted. I liked that one. I also liked TV Off. That was a fun one. Squabble Up, obviously a fun song. Hey Now, I actually really, really like that one. Some people are clowning on it or making memes of it, but I think it's a fun song. TV Off, yeah, great song. Heart Part 6, he kind of reclaimed that title. Drake made a Heart Part 6 song, and Kendrick took that back. Yeah, man, this whole year has been great. I've been somebody who, even though I'm Canadian, I always grew up kind of looking at Drake as not really a rapper. I've always seen him as more of an R&B artist. So whenever people said, like, my favorite rapper is Drake, I always kind of looked at them funny. Like, you even listen to hip-hop music? Like, there's Nas out there, there's Tupac. Like, there's so many better generic answers than Drake. Like, Drake's your favorite rapper? But yeah, I've always like not been a big fan of Drake when it comes to the hip hop side of it, and the fact that he has ghostwriters, the fact that his production is very generic and repetitive, and I'm not really a fan of the OVO Toronto sound anyways. And then, of course, the way that he's butchered Toronto with creating that accent. I think we can all attribute the Toronto accent to Drake, and now Toronto just is unbearable to go to because everybody talks with this weird Jamaican thing. I don't know. It's horrible. Ruined that part of Canada for sure. Toronto is a very annoying place to go to. But anyways, I'm not a big fan of Drake, and I could go on forever dumping on Drake. So obviously I was incredibly happy that Kendrick Lamar finally put on the boxing gloves and stepped in the ring with Drake. However, it was like a heavyweight fighter fighting a tiny little female. It was not even remotely close. Kendrick walloped Drake in the rap beef that they've had this year. It wasn't even remotely close. Drake didn't have one good line, let alone one good song that he put out. Kendrick Lamar wiped the floor with him and made him look like an absolute clown, and also maybe something else. So I don't know if any of that stuff's true that Kendrick is claiming about Drake and his crew, but it's enough to make me kind of push away Drake for now. Like, I'm I don't listen to Drake anymore, really, and I'm kind of, completely Team Kendrick now. So if you guys are Team Drake fans out there, that's totally fine. I mean, I do respect the guy as an artist. He's the most successful music artist of all time. I think he's broken like every Beatles record at this point. Like, he's the most popular artist ever. So congrats to him on that. I just think as a true artist, as far as the artistry goes, I don't have much respect for him because, like I said, the ghostwriting, I don't really think he's that good of a singer. I think he's kind of a mediocre rapper. I wouldn't even put him in the top 100 rappers ever. I think there's at least 100 other individuals out there who are better at the skill of rapping than Drake. So yeah, not to make this video about the Drake-Kendrick beef, but I guess it kind of plays a little bit of a story into this album. And then, of course, Kendrick puts out this album that is literally better than any album Drake's ever made. And it's not even Kendrick's best album, which is great. I think Drake's best album is Take Care, and that's because he did lean into the R&B stuff. I just said that I don't really like his singing, but I do think he's a good enough singer to be a decent R&B artist. But I think most of his hype is manufactured, and it's just kind of what happens. Sometimes artists get elevated to positions that maybe they don't deserve. But again, that's a little bit of pretentiousness, right? We can do the same thing with the Beatles and say like Velvet Underground's a better band than the Beatles, and they should have gotten the popularity that the Beatles got, but the Beatles got pushed up, and you can debate that kind of stuff all day long. I don't want to upset too many people and stay too long on the subject of the rap beef. But yeah, the Kendrick album, like I said, just one of my favorite albums from Kendrick. It's really, really fun. It's got that West Coast vibe to it. He's kind of going back to his roots, making something for the LA people, and it's just such a fun album. So that's what I have at number 1. Those are my top 20 favorite albums of 2024. Like I said, I listened to over 100 albums that were released in 2024. So there were so many albums that I wanted to put on this list. Like, there was at least 15 metal albums that I wanted to put on this list. Krallice had a good album. Blood Incantation had a good album. There's so many good metal albums, but I don't listen to metal as much as I do hip-hop. So I wanted this list to reflect my personal taste, which hopefully it did today. These are the albums that I listened to the most this year. But like I said, there's so many albums I wish I could have put on this list. So let me know down below which albums were your favorite in 2024. I love hearing from you guys. Give me a couple reasons why you love those albums. Give me your top 5, top 10, top 15. Give me your top 100. I don't even care. I'll read through the whole thing and I'll respond to you guys. I love hearing from you guys down below. So don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, share with your friends. It helps boost this channel and the algorithm. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.